Today, anglers, we're going to be talking about a topic that's long overdue for discussion here on my channel, and it's something that I think will help every angler to have a better experience on the water. We're talking about fishing etiquette. These tips for fishing etiquette can help us all become better anglers and can be used across all bodies of water. Stick around for Fishing Etiquette 101. What's up, anglers? Mike here, Trout Made Angler Company. Thanks for smashing on that play button. Thanks for being with me, joining me here on the channel for another episode. For the new people, new subscribers, new anglers, thank you for joining me. If you're a beginner fisherman or even a seasoned trout angler, these tips are going to help you have a better experience on the water. Enjoy your day of trout fishing. I'm no expert. I am not the end-all be-all. These are just tips that I've curated based on my experience, based on fishing regulations and the written and unwritten rules of the water. So we're going to start it off, anglers. We're going to start this off with a bang. Fishing Etiquette 101, rule number one. Rule number one, snagging, netting. It is illegal to snag a fish or net a fish here in California. There are some other places, even species, where it is perfectly fine, and maybe sometimes that's the only way you can catch a certain species is to snag it. But for the most part, anglers, snagging and netting a fish is probably the worst offense. It's really just unsportsmanlike as an angler. I don't really understand the benefit of snagging. I don't really understand it, but I'm sure there's some reasons why people do this. Some of the anglers might be thirsty and just doing it on purpose just to catch a fish. Some anglers may not know. And to be honest, some anglers might have just been taught to do it that way. I have personally been a witness to this unsportsmanlike conduct out there in our fisheries. Unfortunately, I have witnessed it myself. So when I say snagging, anglers, what I'm talking about is to catch a fish, the fish has to have the bait in its mouth, okay? There are some exceptions. My rule of thumb is anything from the pectoral fins forward, okay, is a fair catch to me because it's by the fish's head. So sometimes it might swipe and miss and get the fish somewhere, gill plate, their head, their eye, sometimes even, which is terrible, but it's a good catch. There's also instances where I've had fish swipe at my lure and it actually hooked them in the body. And that's a foul hook, okay? There's no ill intent, no purposeful intent of casting my line and trying to snag. Snagging is pretty much just casting it out there and hooking the fish anywhere you can without it actually going for it and taking it in its mouth. I've also seen some anglers out there netting the fish. These fish that come in our stock trucks, they're drugged up so they could survive the ride, the long journey from wherever they're going, mostly up north and other western states here. And those fish are sometimes disbogulated and just not there. And they're cruising the shoreline and they're very, very close to the shoreline. And you know, me, I don't even cast on those fish. I don't think that's sportsmanlike as well. As far as a sportsman, it's too easy, you can say. But netting? Like actually just taking your net and dipping your net and getting the fish. No hook and line. That's pretty desperate if you ask me. Snagging and netting are definitely illegal in California. And as I mentioned, very, very unsportsmanlike. If you see these things happening on the water, anglers, be sure to call the DFW hotline for snaggers and poachers. I'm going to leave that up right here on the website and it's going to be in the description below. Social media has taken to shaming these anglers that are out there snagging. And as I mentioned, there's probably a numerous number of reasons why these anglers are doing it. In my opinion, they're doing it purposefully, from what I can see. But do we shame them? I'm not sure. But we definitely have to educate anglers, and that's what I'm doing here. The next two bullet points have to do with fishing space, from the shore and a boat. First, we're going to look at the shoreline etiquette when it comes to fishing space. When I was growing up and I was going to the Eastern Sierra, my uncle placed me about 8 to 10 feet away from him and said, hey, you fish over here This is your fishing spot. This is your fishing space. So I grew up, and the general rule of angling and fishing is an 8-foot rule, 8 feet of space. Why? Well, we're going to get into that right now. Now, with the overcrowding lakes, 8 feet might be, I even think, a little too much, okay? Because there is a supply and demand. The past few years, there's been an influx of anglers and fishermen. This is because of COVID, and there's nothing wrong with that. We want to expand our sport, anglers, but when that happens, we have to educate the new anglers coming in. And ourselves, we have to remind ourselves what's going on and be able to set the example out there. So, okay, the demand has risen. So if you're thinking of it as a business, supply and demand, okay, the demand is anglers. There's more anglers, less shoreline. And the supply are those trout. So with overcrowding and limited shoreline, let's bump that down a little to about 5 to 6 feet space between anglers and fishing on the shoreline. This allows for plenty of casting room, enough room for that fish could run and for you to land it. And also, let's not forget about just personal space. And if you are in a situation with limited shoreline, the best thing to do is to ask that angler to fish next to them. But that angler has the option to decline your request, based on their personal space requirements. But the general rule nowadays should be about 5 to 6 feet spacing and room between anglers on the shoreline. And for the anglers who are constantly casting, trying to catch their trout, be aware of the anglers using the dead stick technique, the bait and wait. They have their line out there, it's sitting out there. They also need that space, maybe a little bit more, so try not to cast near their line. And since the shoreline is a little more crowded, okay, if an angler hooks up on a fish and you're 5, 6 feet apart from each other, pull in your line, help that angler out, grab a net even for him. The faster he gets that fish in, the faster you get fishing again as well. So what are the rules when it comes to fishing space if you're on a boat? The general rule that I've seen in my experience is 50 to 100 feet away from shore if you're on a boat. Of course, there's a lot of coves in some of our waters where boats like to sneak in and tuck in and find the schools. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but just be aware of your surroundings, anglers. Like when you're coming into the cove, just be aware of everybody's lines, where they're casting. Also, be aware of the school. You might be just running over the school of fish with your boat and messing it up for everybody. If the opportunity is not there for you to squeeze your boat into that cove, move on to the next honey hole. And again, while you're tucked in the cove or you're in a cove or you're away from the shoreline, just be aware of where you're casting. If you're casting towards anglers on the shoreline, make sure lines don't get tangled. Make sure you're, again, not sitting right on top of the school. And if you learn boat position and where to position your boat with the current and the wind, it's going to make your day a lot easier as well. And always safely stay clear of other boats and anglers. The same thing with shoreline goes for the boat. If you're moving in on a spot, it doesn't hurt to ask, whether it's another boat or anglers fishing on the shoreline. Okay, anglers, the next tip for fishing etiquette is don't be a pot licker. So the definition of pot licking or being a pot licker is immediately fishing the same spot an angler was fishing and had just caught a fish. Okay? So immediately fishing where? And on top of the angler that just caught a fish. So as you saw in the last video, I experienced this myself personally. And maybe I didn't handle it in the best way by calling names, but it was definitely the best option for what was going on in my brain. If you're in the same body of water and you see someone catch a fish, don't run up to their spot immediately and start casting. They're gonna start casting there again and fishing again as well. The fish move, trout swim. So if you just be patient, keep casting at the fishing spot that you found, I'm sure you'll catch a fish soon enough. And again, it goes to angler distance and personal space. And as always, ask. But again, you may be declined, and that's okay. Find another spot, angler. Fishing etiquette tip number 5. Check and follow fishing regulations. Regulations, rules, whatever you want to call it, they're there for a reason, anglers. And as long as we follow these rules, our fisheries will thrive. Even though these are just stock trout, if we're not doing the right things on the water, our fisheries could be taken away from us. A lot more restrictions put in place. So here's some fishing regulations you might run into out there on the water. We already mentioned it. Don't be a snagger. Don't be a netter. Do the right thing, even when no one's looking. Some waters don't allow live bait. Some waters, you have to go barbless. Do not fish in restricted areas, anglers. There's a reason these areas are blocked off, not only for your safety, but we do have some wildlife habitat out there. And some of those, most likely, those restricted areas are meant to protect some of the local wildlife. Some bodies of water are considered reservoirs. And believe it or not, anglers, we get our drinking water from reservoirs. So it's highly recommended, if that lake says that you're not allowed in the water, no wading allowed, don't wade. There's a reason for it. Also, some of these other waters have different types of fish species in them, and you could be actually damaging their habitat. Bedding bass, for example. Just like snagging, another hot topic is poaching. This is when you overfish and you take more than you're supposed to. Check the limits that are posted at your local waters. Most likely it's going to be 4 or 5 fish. And I get it. Some of us catch and release when we're not supposed to, or when it's posted that we're not supposed to. For a long time, anglers, I was against this. These trout are already in a fragile state when they get to these lakes. Catching and releasing, is that other angler might not get a bite. But if that's the worst of it, then okay, catch and release, but just do it properly. Some quick tips to properly catch and release is have a net, keep that fish in the water, use your pliers, remove the hook, use barbless if you're going to be catching and releasing. It'll be easier on that fish and easier on you to catch and release that. There's a big debate between catch and release and waste. Not all of us eat that trout we have to keep anyways, correct? So I'm gonna leave that one up to you, anglers. If you're gonna do it right. I honestly feel it's more of a challenge to go out there and catch one big fish with the 5 chances I get. So just remember, most suburban lakes, park lakes, there is no catch and release. But again, if you're gonna be doing it, take extensive care for that fish, treat it with respect, and let it go to maybe get caught another day. If not by an angler, it's gonna live in the cycle of life with the pelicans and the birds and the cormorants anyways. So I'm gonna leave that one up to you, anglers. If you're gonna do it right. There you have it, anglers, Fishing Etiquette 101. I hope these tips gave you a little bit of insight and hopefully give you a better experience on the water. If you consider trout fishing a sport and enjoy fishing locally, we all have to come together on this. We have to set the example. I'm not perfect. The priority is what we do with these fish and how we treat them and our fisheries. And if you're a business in this community, help me lead by example. Spread the fishing etiquette, let anglers know, and it's all about educating. I'm glad we're able to get this out there, anglers, and have a little bit of discussion around fishing etiquette. We need to start talking more about integrity and honor for the sport of trout fishing, because after all, it's about respecting the game. I hope you guys enjoyed these tips. I would love your feedback and let me know what you think about this fishing etiquette video. Thank you, anglers. My name is Mike. This is Trout Made Angler Company. We'll catch you guys on the next one. I'm out.